hopefully it will go down well. So I'm just going live on YouTube. Welcome to another episode of the Pedestrian Podcast. Joining myself as ever this week, Stuart Court is joining me as ever is Mr. Adam Nathan. How are we, sir?
I'm not bad. I keep forgetting that people actually watch this when they've got really nothing else to do, and I come on this flipping show with a Hoover on my left shoulder and a mop on my right, and it's pathetic, really. I mean, the lack of professionalism is. Although there's a flying animal on the screen as well, cat. so you know, actually, maybe I'm only second out of three today, which is a nice bonus.
that sounded like a song. Like, did he just needed? Was it Stuck in the Middle with You? That's a
collage of wedding pictures stuck in the middle with me. Perfect.
Yeah, and golf is open, and my hamstrings are tight, Adam.
Yeah, tell me about it. Played for the first time in 5 months. I'm aching I'm aching on the inside of my elbows, which I didn't even think was a place that you can ache. But I think that's what 33 does. You just start to feel my mortality ever so slightly, which is quite terrifying.
Yeah. This week's guest is the co-host of Danny and Gallant on 710 ESPN Seattle, and his own power hour straight after 2 is Mr. Paul Gallant. Welcome to the Pedestrian Podcast.
Stu, Adam, thank you so much for bringing me on. It's a pleasure. Get to go international this time. I'm feeling it. I'm excited. Let's talk some stuff.
So people have tried to do a lot of different things. Adam, for example, is trying to get every Seahawk on Pro Football Reference onto the podcast. But you, possibly braver and bolder, you want to find out more about Seahawks Twitter.
Yes. Yeah, it's a fascinating place. My first time in this industry was covering the mess formerly known as the Houston Texans. I'm not even sure if they're really a team anymore, but it's a different experience. Ever since I have come up here, I've been fascinated because I feel like Seahawks fans are significantly more intelligent, which has made me had to, raise my level, seeing as I'm sometimes on top of things. And it's been really fascinating. I've gotten to talk to a bunch of different people. Most recently, I talked to Norb, who does NorbCam on YouTube. He's a Super 12 fan. He's a lot of fun. So we got to talk about just the experiences of going back into stadiums, which we finally are going to be able to do in 2 days. Holy smokes. So I'm really, it's been a lot of fun. And, I'm glad you guys, at the very least, are aware of it.
It's funny because I think Stuart and I often talk about the fact that as a show, I think we're very much not in Seahawk Twitter. And sometimes we lament the fact that, it could get us a few thousand more listens a week. But actually, on balance, I think I'm quite happy being away from the prying eye of a cesspit at times, unfortunately.
But it's a fun cesspit. There's something about it that cracks me up. I like how it's divided into schisms. There's people that are like, oh, Russell Wilson, this guy, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's trying to get all the power. And there's like Pete Carroll. Oh, Pete Carroll can't do anything. He's old. He's 175 years old. And I just enjoy the back and forth, and I like to sit in the middle. I have found myself leaning towards Team Pete a little bit more recently, but look, ultimately, this is the funny part of the whole thing is that they don't know how bad it is, and yet they quabble over some very small things. Whatever the case, I've very much enjoyed my time. Now it's been a year and a half here in Seattle, and my interactions sometimes rather hostile with them. I've been amused by all of them.
So how quickly did you pick up on that? Because I don't think I've ever met a Texans fan.
Yeah.
So how quickly did you pick up on the fact that the Seahawks fan was boisterous? And
I knew already. I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting into, but it's one thing to see it from afar. It's another thing to actually dive into it. Because when I was in Houston with my co-host Seth Payne, and for those who don't know, Seth is awesome. I think he's a tremendously talented host. He used to play football for the Jaguars, for the Texans for a while, and he and I started to, I think, I'm not going to act like we discovered Mina Kimes, but before Mina Kimes he became like the apple of ESPN's eye, we thought she was hilarious. And that kind of got us into just taking a look at Seahawks Twitter. We were like, oh, wow, these people are something else. Because in Houston, everyone's just basically like, yep, everything's terrible. Bad things are going to happen. And whether it's Bill O'Brien or, oh my goodness, all these awful things that are going on allegedly with Deshaun Watson, it's kind of one of those things where whether it's the Oilers blowing a 35-3 lead, or you just sort of assume the worst when it comes to football in Houston, Texas.
Yeah. But one thing in Houston, how was it covering a good baseball team?
It was something else. Now it's kind of weird. I have all these things on the wall commemorating my time there. I did a show for like 8 straight hours the night they won the World Series until 4 a.m. We were taking calls. I was drinking champagne. It was great. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, but they cheated. So crap. Does that experience still count? Hey, look, they didn't strip away the banner, but yeah, it was fun. I got to say though, and maybe I'm being a little bit too positive, but I have liked what I've seen from the Mariners in my year and a half here. I don't know if that outweighs 20 years of experience for Mariners fans, but I'm excited to see what happens on Thursday. Hopefully that excitement will carry over into May and into June, etc.
I was thinking that obviously, yeah, going from the Astros to the Mariners and the Texans to the Seahawks, and starting off in Boston, is there like a sweet spot of a team of how good you want a team to be that makes them the perfect kind of level to cover? Because I kind of feel that if you're a Patriots guy, and you turn into Scott Zolak and just that kind of arsehole for 10 years, he might be your best mate, in which case I apologize.
No. I understand how he gives off that impression.
I'm sure he isn't, but that's on the recaps that I've heard of him. But I kind of feel like the way in which the Seahawks are going this year might be that perfect sweet spot, because it kind of has to happen this year or something is going to be explosive at the end of it. And that must be quite exciting going into a year to cover that.
I think a lot of people believe that we feel that way. And I can understand why. It definitely makes content a lot easier. I would say that ultimately I try to still keep the sports fan alive inside of me. And I've lived in a bunch of different places. I grew up in South Shore of Massachusetts, lived there for 14 years, went to high school in St. Petersburg, Florida. So that's in Tampa Bay. I was there during the Gruden Bucks years after they had won the Super Bowl, and kind of realized in firsthand, like in high school, listening to sports radio, oh, wow, Gruden's a bit of a two-face. And I would say that having grown up watching that team in New England, you always want the team to be great. I don't care if there's drama going on or not. I think that when there's a great team, people always want to talk about them. They bring people together. And I would say that right now where the Seahawks are is, hey, they're relevant consistently every single year. I would like a little bit less of this drama, to be perfectly honest. I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of, it's been fun. We've had some fun conversations on the air, but ultimately too, you have this almost feeling in the back of your mind, like, wait a second, are we actually seeing the end of the tunnel and it's a brick wall, and are we about to hit it fairly soon, or is it, a couple years away? I don't think there's really a setting that I necessarily prefer, other than I want the team to be good and not bad, because bad, you guys saw it with the start in 2013 when Richard Sherman had the pick 6 on Matt Schaub. That started a great run for the Seahawks. That started the disaster of a 14-game losing streak for the Texans. And never again, please, for the love of God.
So obviously the fan base has been put to test. What is your read on the Russell Wilson situation, should we say, as we talk?
I've gotten a taste for his flair for dramatics and theatrics. You go back to 2018 with the contract negotiations, and this is probably just a carryover effect from it. I feel like maybe there's more vitriol between Russell Wilson's agent, Mark Rodgers, and the general manager, John Schneider, than there really might be any acrimony between Russ and the actual Seahawks themselves. I think Russ has his own feelings on how to go about doing things, and I do think that as a athlete that has accomplished things that he has, I can understand why he feels the way that he does. But I also think that he's got a bigger ego than a lot of quarterbacks out there. And I'm not honestly going to fault him for that. A lot of quarterbacks do. It's been annoying to me, but it's not for me to say like, oh, he shouldn't be like that. He is who he is. I feel like he is looking at this situation right now, and he is thinking about himself through the actions of, first off, what you saw Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes doing in the Super Bowl, running for his life. And also, I think, looks at Tom Brady and he's like, shoot, if I want to be the greatest quarterback of all time, I have to win 6 more Super Bowls. And, you know, at age 32, I could understand. I mean, I'm going to turn 32 soon as well. You can look at your career and you're like, wait, am I where I want to be? Have I done enough? So I do get some of it. I don't know if I agree with the way that he's gone about it. And while his agent has been, I think, the primary actor, like Russ has really been pushed into saying a lot of the things that he has said by masterful interviewers like Dan Patrick, or in that Zoom session after the Walter Payton Man of the Year Awards, where he essentially got boxed into finally saying like, hey, look, this is what's happening. But ultimately, I do think that things are getting better and that this can be put in the rearview mirror entirely if the team plays better this coming season. That's just going to be a lot more difficult given what the rest of the NFC West has been doing over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
In terms of playing better, last year was crystallized with the "Let Russ Cook" slogan that dominated. Yeah, and he here come the aprons and the pots and pans and the spatulas, which will not be seeing their way into Adam Nathan Catering kitchen. I can tell you that for nothing. But it's interesting when it comes to Wilson, because you have, in general, and this is quite reductive, the local media seem to be pretty on board with what Pete Carroll is doing and the process and the system. And the national media seem very opposite to that. And whenever you listen to the national media, in general, the general thing you're going to get is they don't let Russell Wilson throw enough. Pete Carroll wants to run the ball too much. Let Russ cook or whatever. But the interesting thing for me is that I find that a lot of the local fans side with the national media on this as opposed to the local media. And I'm wondering I don't know if I'm looking for a reason for that, but just if there's if that affects how you do things at all. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to put words in your mouth and what you think, but it's interesting to me that you've got the fan side with the national, when typically you would expect the fans that check the team the most would side with the national media who watch it, the local media who watch the team the majority of the time.
It's an interesting dynamic. I think that there are actually more people that are in local media that would side with Russ over with Pete. And I think they look at it from the perspective of Russ is 32, the super talent, and he's going to be here for a while. We want him here as long as possible. And whatever it takes to keep him here, whether it means moving on from Pete Carroll or John Schneider or whatever, they're willing to do it. And I also get that line of thinking. I mean, it does make sense. And if you take a look at the way that the NBA has been trending, that's generally the direction. I have also found, while I like to ignore sometimes national opinions, when there are so many of the same national opinions, you have to say, all right, well, where is this all coming from and who is being talked to? I would say that if you want to put together like maybe a flow chart of all of the people that have been talking about the Seahawks on a regular basis, the one that I would focus on the most is Colin Cowherd, because there is a little bit of a connection there. And I feel like Cowherd is actually getting some messages through either Mark Rodgers, Russell Wilson's agent, or perhaps through back channels to Russ. I feel like at the very least, he has a decent idea of what's going on, at least in the mind of him. And it's funny because we talk about Colin Cowherd a lot, and I think a lot of people assume hot take artist. I don't really 100% get that vibe. I mean, they're the screaming on television show guys that I think are the ones that generally are doing that quite a bit more. But I think locally, I think it's a little more split, local media. And that's, I think, also what's so interesting about it, whether it's the fan base, where I would say the demographic tends to be a lot older, those who are siding with Pete. And then the younger one who are like, this guy's some old coot who doesn't know what he's doing, which is interesting. I mean, Pete Carroll's the youngest 70-year-old I've ever met. I am shocked that he's 70. He makes me feel old on a regular basis when we talk to him in person. So that's sort of the back and forth that's been taking place. And I try to walk down the middle. I think having somewhat fresh eyes gives me a little bit of an advantage on that. But I know, as someone who, grew up watching and rooting for Tom Brady, that you got to be a little careful when you're constantly comparing yourself to that of Brady, or when you're comparing the expectations that you have for a team to something that was just absolutely preposterous that was done in the NFL. I mean, geez, 20 years of success. I mean, they didn't have a losing season from the year 2000 to this past season, which is just an insane number of years in a row to be that successful. And then you assume that you can do that every single year. The Patriots kind of broke the whole thing as far as how to properly evaluate your team and appreciate what you have in front of you. So that was a long tangent of an answer, but we'll appreciate that. It's been, I think there are some things nationally that you have to listen to and I think that whenever you hear them consistently said, you have to start digging. And I've been trying to do that as best I can.
So have you and Danny, because you're the first voices people hear if they tune into your station of a morning, do you and Danny enjoying like the Lester Freeman Prez dynamic you could be having going, trying to break codes and break messages coming through?
It's been interesting. I think we both got to a point though where we're both a little tired of Russ. But this morning was interesting because Danny is now looking at the entire situation and he's seeing that the Los Angeles Rams, they traded all they did for Matt Stafford, and the 49ers are of course making an aggressive move to do something with that number 3 pick. And now all of a sudden he's like, you know what? I just want Russ here. I know it's annoying, but I just want Russ here no matter what. And I'm like, wait a second. We're just going to move on from these 5 months, or 5 weeks. It wasn't 5 months. It feels like 5 weeks. We're just going to move on from these 5 weeks like it didn't happen. So that's really my only issue right now. Is it, can I at least get a, hey, the Seahawks are good, as opposed to, oh, go Hawks. Yeah, we're fine. Like that. That's the one annoyance that I have right now. Though some people make it out to be me hating Russ. And I can understand why, I guess, but I don't hate Russ. I like watching Russ a great deal. I watch Brock Osweiler. I'm done with bad quarterbacks.
Look, all of us love Russell Wilson being on our team. I think if Russell Wilson was traded to another team, we'd love seeing him get smacked in the head 396 times again in the next.
If he forced his way out, yes.
If he forced his way out. But the interesting thing for me is I was listening to Joe Fan's podcast and he had Mike Robinson on last week, and he asked Mike, do you still speak to Russ? And he said, no, I don't have a relationship with him. Very few people do. And he said, he even name checked Robert Turbin as someone who has a relationship. And then obviously in our show with Doug a couple of weeks ago, we were just talking before we started recording that Doug said an awful lot about their relationship without saying a lot. And that seems to permeate through a lot of the older guys and the people that really defined the decade of Seahawk football. And I'm just wondering if, although Russ has got supreme confidence in his own ability, he's kind of putting himself in a difficult position where there's so much on him to succeed, because I'm a bit worried there's going to be an awful lot of people ready with an aha moment if, the ice breaks from underneath him, and it's getting thinner and thinner by the more he sort of seems to want to isolate himself.
Yeah, it must be weird living that way. I mean, he lives in, I think, his own bubble with his wife and his family, and also the immediate supporting cast. I don't know if you guys have, I'm sure you did. There's this article way back in the day. Someone passed it along to me over the last couple of weeks, and I read it. It was by Greg Bishop in Sports Illustrated, and just talks about Russell Wilson's essentially closest group, which includes Mark Rodgers' agent and Mark Rodgers' son. And it was an interesting group. And there were things that I found a little bit surprising about just Greg Bishop's encounter with the court of Russell Wilson, and maintaining those relationships over time. Like, he's a quarterback. I mean, there are so many people that go in and out of his life, whether it's on the football field or in just, business opportunities and things like that. So I can see how maybe for him it's a little difficult, but at the same time, yeah, it is very clear that he's someone that keeps to himself. And he's also someone that I think this year, coming out of last season, where they start off the season great, they have a stretch where they don't play so well, and he's one of the main reasons for that stretch where they didn't play so well. I mean, we all know him as a guy who rarely turns the football over, and he turned it over 10 times over 3 games over a span of 4 weeks. And that was surprising. And then the rest of the season, it wasn't the same, but it wasn't as if they stopped trying to make the offense go through Russ. It just stopped working. And to me, it felt like at the end of the year, Russ was trying to sort of distance himself from the struggles of the offense as if it weren't his problem, because he came to them with some solutions. Well, Russ came to them with solutions, at least from that piece in The Athletic, after 2 of the games where he had the most turnovers. So timing wise, probably not the best time to go to your coach and say, I've got some ideas. Russ, you turned the ball seven times the last 2 weeks. You turned it over. Yeah, but I've got some ideas. And then they say, well, we're not going to really listen to them that much. And then he storms out. And it almost set up this narrative as if, the second half of the season, where, by the way, the Seahawks were 6-2 and dramatically improved on the defensive side of the football, as if that side of that part of the season didn't happen. It was just an offensive regression the rest of the way. They played good defenses, and yeah, there was some offensive regression. The offensive line got banged up. I think Brian Schottenheimer's limitations. We saw the limit, I think, of an impact that he can have on an offense. There's a lot of variety of factors that led to the Seahawks offense struggling the way that it did down the stretch. I don't think Tyler Lockett was 100%, but it all felt like Russell Wilson was trying to distance himself from all of it at the end of the year. And what's interesting is, from the national perspective, the side of things that you guys are seeing, Stu and Adam, is that this is all of a sudden a team that is not listening and not paying attention and not doing anything that Russell Wilson wants. And I just don't think that was necessarily the case this past season. I think their offensive line took a step forward, and I'm intrigued to see what they'll do next year with Shane Waldron. But now I'm looking at Shane Waldron and I kind of feel bad for him. I mean, this is a really tough situation to be put in. Yeah,
your first NFL gig at this level, and you've got the circus in town. Again, the Seahawks outside of Russell Wilson have been busy. They haven't really done much out of the ordinary. Re-signed Carlos Dunlap last week. Kerry Hyde has come over from the Niners. Gabe Jackson, probably the biggest splash, but also a late-round pick for a veteran who improves the line is something Schneider's done for most. What's your read on how everything else the Seahawks have done has gone and will affect the team in 2021?
They definitely upgraded with Gabe Jackson at left guard, and they only had to give up a 5th-round pick to do it. I think some people are getting a little stressed by the fact that the Seahawks only have 3 draft picks. I'm not someone that puts a lot of excitement behind the concept of what a draft pick can be. I think a lot of people love the potential attached to a 1st-round pick or a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick. To me, give me a veteran that can play now. You're not going to likely find that in the 5th round or the 6th round or the 7th round. And over the last couple of seasons, I've liked what John Schneider has done after the Frank Clark trade in trading later round draft picks for veterans, whether it's a rental 3rd-round pick for Jadeveon Clowney or a 5th-round pick for Quandre Diggs, 2 1st-round picks for Jamal Adams. It was a lot, but your defense was getting a little desperate. Carlos Dunlap for a 5th-round pick. I forget what the trade for Quinton Dunbar was. Was it a 5th? Was it a 6th? I forget off the top of my head. And now Gabe Jackson. They have been approaching things from their perspective of, we're more likely to find a veteran that we know than finding a guy in the back of the draft like we were able to do in 2011 and 2012. And I think that strategy is a good one. I know people want to see them spend big in free agency. I get it. I think the people that they were hoping, though, Seahawks fans, that the Seahawks would get, like a Joe Thuney on the offensive line. I'm always a little hesitant about New England Patriots offensive linemen when they leave the nest. We just saw 2 guys like Nate Solder had to restructure his contract, and Trent Brown got traded back to New England for a 7th-round pick from the Raiders. So I think that they took a step forward on the offensive line. And then the other important things are, okay, they took a couple of flyers on Kerry Hyder and Akello Witherspoon. Hyder is someone who's produced. I mean, he's had a couple of 8-sack seasons, and you're hoping that he can actually give you a little bit more than maybe Jaron Reed was. Jaron Reed, a little inconsistent for my taste. Akello Witherspoon has a lot of measurables that are intriguing, and supposedly at the beginning of the 2019 season, at least 49er people will claim this. He looked like the best corner on the team. Did not last very long. And then after that, I'm intrigued by Gerald Everett. Of course, he worked with Shane Waldron. Nothing they've done is like blowing you out of the water sexy. But what I like the most is that they kept Chris Carson and they kept Carlos Dunlap. Yeah. And I think those were going to be absolutely critical for offensively the way that the Seahawks want to go about it with Chris Carson back. And then for on the defensive side of things, Carlos Dunlap, when he joined the defense, it just became a unit that actually was competent.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Stu. I mean, looking a few weeks ago, it looked like a roster filled with enormous holes. We thought Carson was gone. We assumed Dunlap was gone. They've certainly filled those holes with bodies, but I think in English soccer, we have a thing whereby the longer someone gets injured for, the better player they become, because you think, oh, well, we'll get him back and we'll be flying. And I feel like someone like Akello Witherspoon and Gerald Everett, I could say Akello Witherspoon and you'd be pumped. But I could say Akello Witherspoon and you might be a bit more disappointed. And I kind of feel there's a lot of that in the roster right now that could elevate itself to being better. but I feel like we also could see a lot of the same as last year, if not worse, in some key positions, notably in the secondary. Are you getting a steer on what the general consensus is of that over there?
Yeah, it's a good point. Look, they're rolling the dice on themselves and their ability to evaluate defensive backs. And you know what? They've had a good track record with it. So who am I to say like, oh, you guys, what are you doing? You know, I'm curious to see what they'll be able to do with the Killer Witherspoon. And look, the Dunbar trade, Dunbar, I think was either number 1 or number 2 on Pro Football Focus in 2019. And I mean, while I liked what he did in that Patriot game, he had a knee issue that was nagging him. And on top of the knee issue, he apparently never really picked up Pete's defense the way that Pete wanted him to. So that's a bit of a problem for them. With Witherspoon, I mean, the bright side is the last guy that you brought over at cornerback from San Francisco, DJ Reed. I mean, even though he's exactly not a prototypical Pete Carroll cornerback, he played really well. So maybe it'll be an easy transition for Ahkello Witherspoon coming from a Robert Saleh defense to this one. That's what I'm at the very least looking at and hoping for. But you're right. There is a lot of could going on here, but you're forced to operate from a, hey, we could get X out of this guy, Y out of this guy. Every team has holes. I tend to think that the team that you follow most closely, you're going to assume that they are terrible at the draft, that they are terrible at game management decisions, and that they're not able to go in free agency and spend the way that you want them to. And I think that's probably like 80% of fan bases across the NFL that are all saying the exact same thing. Game management is hard. Pete Carroll knows this. He's still working on it. It's a work in progress for him this little far into his career. Most teams struggle with the draft. So I guess I'm just really patient and calm with it. I understand why others aren't. And maybe you feel like there's a little more urgency because Russell Wilson was sort of, airing out his feelings and stuff. But not every single team is perfect. And there are certain parts of the team where you have to bet that you're going to be able to find a diamond in the rough. And honestly, I think the Seahawks track record, at least at cornerback, means that we should give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, at least at that position.
And there's also one more, hopefully former 49ers cornerback who's about to make his way back to Seattle as well. So there's still one more out there.
I would love to see Richard Sherman back here, especially after the drama of this offseason. How would that be, huh? Richard Sherman and Russ back in the same locker room?
Yeah, it would one of those positions as well, because there's a lot of this. There seems to be a build-up of chat around KJ Wright and his next move, and none of it seems to be involving the Seahawks. They're going to go into a season with Jordan Brooks, second year. Bobby Wagner is obviously still the best middle linebacker in the league. And then,
I don't know about that.
And then a massive question mark at the other linebacker spot. That seems to be the spot for me on that defensive side of the ball, which has the biggest questions to answer over the next between now and September 12th or whatever week 1 is.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with KJ Wright. It sounds like there's some interest from Dallas, and I'm not surprised by that, given that Dan Quinn's there, the ex-Seahawks defensive coordinator. I will say, as far as Wagner goes, not to say that Wagner's not one of the best linebackers in the NFL. I just think Devin White on Tampa Bay is better. And honestly, there were times last year where I liked Fred Warner a little bit better. Interestingly enough, I said that going into 1 week between the Seahawks and 49ers that Fred Warner was better. And then Bobby had his best game of the year. They were not, I think, always putting Bobby Wagner in the best position to succeed. So I can understand why maybe this year, if you watch it on film, didn't exactly look the way that I wanted it to. I kind of came here with the assumption, having played with the Seahawks in Madden, that Bobby Wagner would just kill everybody. Because if you play with Bobby Wagner in Madden, he's like the most terrifying player on the field. But linebacker is going to be interesting. KJ Wright's the free agent. I thought KJ Wright was their best linebacker last year. I think that when they moved him to strong side linebacker, or maybe I just like strong side linebackers because I actually like what Michael Kendricks brought to the table the year before. And a lot of people are like, what? KJ Wright fit into that role, I thought, seamlessly, and he will be missed. The Seahawks probably won't be in their base defense every single play, but you do have to bet on the talent that you bring in. Jordan Brooks, I think, I think he's got something special. I know it's a weird pick to make at the back of the first round. A lot of the nerdier side of Seahawks Twitter are going to argue, well, that's not a good value pick. Well, screw value. If you like the player, draft the player. It's the back of the first round. Stop acting like it's a top 10, top 5 pick. This is I think, guy who has not just speed, but a physicality that you need to have at that linebacker position. And he's also shown the ability that he can cover too. So it's definitely a position where you got to wonder, okay, well, what does Cody Barton give us? What are the rest of the guys? Ben Burkervin, who's more of a special teams player. What do these other linebackers bring to the table? And if they lose KJ Wright, that will be a loss. But I think the good news is that as far as a KJ Wright return, and knock on wood, this could change obviously while I'm talking right now, but it sounds like the only interest in KJ Wright is from a team like Dallas, and he wants a 2-year deal, it seems. And from what I read in the latest with the conversations with Dallas, they haven't even gotten to the money talk yet. They've just been talking about years, and Dallas is only willing to offer 1 year. So hopefully that stays true, because I would like to see I would like to see KJ Wright back here.
Yeah. Also, the biggest thing I think I said on this pod during the season with Jordan Brooks was every time he got on the field, he looked better than the time before, which is all you kind of really want to see from a rookie, no matter what round he was. And also KJ Wright, another guy who's been on this pod this 2021 calendar year as well, which is, it's pretty wild. Well, we had Danny on last year. Do you ever think he will come out of his shell a bit?
What do you mean by that?
I think he's joking.
Okay. Gotcha. I was like, whoa. So, I don't know about him. I'm very fortunate to have him as a co-host. He has been big brotherly to me, and I mean that every single sense of the word. I mean, it's not easy to move to a new place, especially to move to a new place in the midst of a pandemic. And he's been really like a big brother the entire way around. And I love that cackle. Whenever you can get him to laugh that way, there's just something about it that makes you get like a super extra, like little fist pump inside. It's great. God, yeah, he is quite the personality. That is for darn short.
Yeah, that must make those earlier starts easier though, when you got someone with that energy to bounce off.
And all that history.
Too early for me. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, look, I have a. Hang on a sec. Oh crap. Well, I've been reading a bunch of like Seattle sports books, trying to catch up. And as you can see, like, this is a book about the '95 Mariners and the early Mariners, and I'm trying my best to like learn things and remember things, but nothing better than, as opposed to me reading the book, than someone who's been here the last 20 years, both as a beat writer for the Seahawks, but also as a beat writer for the Seattle Sonics too. The Supersonics. He knows his stuff, and the insight that he brings, because he's still, I think it's a lost art as a journalist to be able to build the kind of relationships where people trust you enough to have off the record conversations with you. And those off the record conversations, like, I know there's a bunch of things that like I haven't really been able to get out of Danny, because he's keeping people that he talks to very closely, close to the vest, but he is still very connected to some ex-Seahawk players, to ex-Mariner players, ex whatever. And I think that the way that he goes about those relationships and cultivating it, I'm trying to learn from that and to do that myself. A little difficult, again, because we haven't been able to see anybody for like a year. Do you believe it's been a year? What the heck?
I know, incredible. I mean, it's a fascinating market overall, because I feel like Seattle sports, aside from the Sonics championship that they had and a couple of college championships, wasn't a hell of a lot of success going on in the pro game. And then all of a sudden, Richard Sherman, Marshawn Lynch come in like an absolute wrecking ball and change the whole attitude of a town when it comes to sports, and they win. And they give a feeling of, we need to win and we need to keep winning, to a lot of the fans. But it's interesting because on our like UK Facebook group, we've got quite a few older American fans who quite regularly say, I don't know what you guys are moaning about. You should have seen what we were like in the 80s.
Yeah.
But I get it. I get it, because when you have gone through that, at some point you get good, and then you think, well, why are you being so ungrateful? But not to conflate a pandemic with anything, to do with sports, but if anything gives you an indication of, your mortality and kind of how life goes on and how you got to take as many things as you can. It should be this, right? We've had a year of our lives taken away from us, and I feel like I'm getting more desperate to win, and I am a newer fan, but I'm wondering what you feel about the general market, because I'm often made to feel like I'm ungrateful for wanting the best team that we're going to have for a while win. And I feel
no
like
one should ever tell you you're ungrateful as a sports fan. And look, I'll say this as probably the most spoiled sports fan ever, growing up a Patriots fan, at one point being a Red Sox fan before we had a nasty divorce. And I mean, shoot, I like Florida Gator football. Like, they've always been good. I like the Tampa Bay Lightning because I lived in Tampa Bay for a little bit. I'm weird. Like, my fanhood lies all over the place. I do kind of seem like that obnoxious, like, oh, wow, you're a Yankees and Lakers and Duke and Cowboys fan. Like, I kind of come off like that a little bit from time to time, but I'm of the belief that you should always expect the most out of your team. Even if it's a local team and that you don't have to defend them to the death every single time. And yeah, you can be grateful, but things change and expectations have changed. And those expectations have been different for a while. Like, I know there was the Jim Mora Jr. I don't know why I said it like Sean Connery, rest in peace. There was the Jim Mora Jr. era in between, but I mean, shoot, from Mike Holmgren to now, I mean, this has been an unbelievable run from two different eras of head coach, whether it was Matt Hasselbeck, in the mid to early 2000s to where we're at now. This has expectations wise changed. And yeah, it's not like there weren't bad years in the middle or annoying years where you're watching 3-3 or 6-3 games against the Browns with Charlie Whitehurst under center. But you should never be told that you're being ungrateful. Everyone's allowed to fan in the way that they want to, and some people like to fan in a way where you're kind of looking at this team like it's your kid or like it's your significant other, and you're wanting the most out of it, but it's never gonna be perfect. And yet, at the end of the day, you can still appreciate them, even if you are, like, mad at them, I guess.
So you're a Patriots fan who brought the word gate on the end of things back into the public conscience. Then you throw a Florida Gator who had that rather interesting Urban Meyer team, as it turned out as well.
Yeah. Oh, you don't see they let some things slide there, huh?
Certainly seems that way. One thing back on your 710 show, I realized over the weekend that this now means we have a Danny Gallant full house, full house, because we've had yourself, we've had Danny, we've also had Morat and Jessamine as well back in the day on the show over the last 150 odd episodes. So.
I love Jess. I miss Jess. More is great. Jess, like, big sisterly. Also will get you into shape if you acting a fool.
So I like doing a bit of research on our guests when they're coming on, and so one of the three, I reached out and said, look, we've got Paul coming on. Have you got any gossip that I can use on the show? And one of them, who will remain unnamed, she or he, I may say, not to give anything away, asked me to talk to you about flag football and how that may have gone for you.
So I don't know if you guys take. That's really funny. I'm guessing that was Jess. So I wanted to play in the NFL so badly. I can't explain how badly I wanted it. And I didn't work as hard as I needed to get there, by the way. So it's not as I kind of thought it was just going to come naturally. But
how far did you get?
I played in high school. Okay. That's good enough. But most people in the States, if you play football, you're going to be able to get to the high school level. I like to think I was very good. I was probably good, maybe above average. Whatever the case, I still play flag football a lot. As much as I can. I haven't been able to this past year. It's been driving me crazy, but that's how I get all my testosterone and my anger out. And yeah, I take it way too seriously. Like, everyone hates me when they play with me. I'm talking trash. I'm saying mean things. I am not myself. I'm an entirely different person out on that field. Like, I'm yelling mean things, getting in people's faces. And after the game, I'm like, oh, good game, man. Like, I act like I've the public face that people are generally used to. It kind of comes back. But yeah, and I've brought it up from time to time on the show, and I've been realizing now, like I did it in Houston and people kind of like thought it was funny because I was doing it not entirely seriously. But when I started bringing it up here, people were like, why are you bringing this up? No one cares. This is like worse than bringing up your high school football playing days, which by the way, weren't even that good. So I've gotten better, but that it used to be sort of a running gag where I'd be like, yeah, I was playing flag football the other night, what I just saw out of the Seahawks last night reminds me a whole lot of myself, which is obviously the most insufferable thing that anyone could actually say. But I love flag football. I love playing any kind of intramural sports, basketball too. I miss it. Really miss it.
Sounds like most of the guys down the local power league here, Stu, don't you think? We have
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what a power league is like. It's basically like a football field size cut into lots of five-a-side fields, so 5-on-5, and power league
nice.
is a massive thing over here. And yeah, people take it very seriously, me included.
Yeah. Everyone's a regular David Beckham, or back in my day, I would have been playing for Chelsea, and
if I'm gonna leave,
my knee hurt.
If I'm gonna go out and stand in the pissing rain for an hour, run around, I at least want to try and win whilst I'm doing it. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, God.
What's the point otherwise?
It's some of the stuff that again, no one cares, but some of the stuff that we've played in here, like when it gets like cold monsoon, oh my God, it's miserable. I don't know how people play high school sports here, like around, I would say like late October through February or anything outside. Cause it's never like it's snowy. It's just dry, and not even necessarily even driving rain. It's just cold and rain, which is the worst, I think, combination that you can have as far as outdoor elements. I'd rather play in the snow, to be perfectly honest.
Adam, anything else?
Yeah, I was thinking of just back on the team situation, and I wonder if this is something that comes up. I found the exit interview that Pete Carroll did at the end of the season really interesting. And I think Michael Sean Dugart asked him about who holds you accountable. And he mentioned his sons, and he mentioned a guy who he nicknames Potato as someone who holds him accountable. So I'm not going to, hold someone called Tater as maybe the bastion of accountability. But one thing that did strike me is that he said, I speak to my guys, John speaks to his guys, and then we come back and we talk about it together. And you see, PCJS as an acronym so regularly. And it struck me that it was interesting that for the first time, I felt they were talking about two sides that then come back and talk to each other. And I wonder if we're starting to see maybe it's PC, spacebar, JS, and maybe a slight fissure between the two camps.
Interesting that you mentioned it as a fissure. It is definitely a partnership with the way that it's been described to me. And it's going to be impossible to know exactly how all of the sausage is made without, sitting with these guys every single day for the course of a year. But I do think that John Schneider has his own directive and what he wants on the roster. And I think for Pete, he has a different idea from time to time, and that they do meet in the middle. I don't know if it's a fissure, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on, is that the contract extensions that they have signed recently are staggered, where Pete Carroll's contract expires before that of John Schneider. Now, I don't know if that's because Pete has an idea of when he's going to walk away, but I do think it means that as time goes on, John Schneider's fingerprints will be on more of it. I have always found it interesting, and I think that this is something that, again, kind of comes through because I do think that there's some acrimony between Russell Wilson's agent and John Schneider. But there is, I think, this notion that Pete tells John what to do. And I don't know that I buy that. And I've heard Pete a couple of times talk about things that he wants to do in the draft. I think there was this interview, it was Flying Coach podcast that he did with Steve Kerr during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about Chris Carson. And I guess how in the draft, Pete, we all know how he loves running backs, was, I think, nudging John Schneider, like, hey, can we get him? Can we get him? Can we get him over the course of the draft? And John kept waiting. And they got him in the 7th round. And I think that they might have a general idea consensus-wise when they meet together and overlook, like, say, for a draft, guys who they want, and same thing for free agency. But I really do think that this is a partnership. I'm curious about what you mentioned, though, like going forward. I don't think that it exists right now, any sort of fissure, but I think just naturally over time, it could be that way. And I mean, there were talks about John going to Detroit. I don't know if they were as serious as perhaps some made them out to be. It might have been, in the case of John, a way that he could get a little extra cheddar out of the Seahawks. But this will, I think, at one point be John Schneider's team. And we might be talking about a world without Pete Carroll, which is hard to imagine just given how youthful he seems to be still at the very young age of 69 years old.
Also, I mean, John Schneider's biggest guy is the quarterback because obviously he banged the drum for him. There was chat in 2011 that Pete wanted Andy Dalton, and obviously waited a year, had the year of T-Jack, and then Schneider waited and waited pretty much as long as he could before taking his guy, and that changed pretty much everything, Adam.
Yeah. He is, I think, and I base this off of some of the quarterbacks that we know he's evaluated over the last couple of years. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, which Russell Wilson took issue with. Look, if you're a general manager and you're not evaluating quarterbacks, you're not doing your job right. I am very curious as to who he might view as the next quarterback. This draft is weird. I would be very surprised if they decided. I joked about it this morning. I don't actually want them to go about doing this, but I said, the Seahawks should draft a quarterback in the second round to make Russell Wilson angry and play well like Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. But I mean, I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback this year, but I am curious as to who John Schneider picks next. I would imagine that person would be a top 3 round pick. And I want to see what he's able to do with it. I hope he gets that opportunity to pick the next quarterback, but I hope it's no time soon. I hope we get to see a lot more Russell Wilson before we get to that point. I would just say that I think John Schneider deserves the benefit of the doubt, given some of the quarterbacks that he has evaluated over the last couple of years and seems to have been on the right side of, specifically Josh Allen, who I thought sucked in college. I thought he was awful. I remember I was doing a job application for a place in Portland while I was in Houston. And I watched an Oregon Ducks game. And it was Oregon versus Wyoming. And the entire show that I did a little mock show for them. And the entire show, I was just ripping Josh Allen because I was like, this guy's a disaster. Like, this guy's a pro prospect. He's the worst player on the field. He's been awesome over the past year. It's crazy sometimes how your evaluations, you look at a guy and you're like, I can see through all the bad stuff on the field. I see the traits that he has. So, we'll see. We will see on that front. But, it is definitely a relationship that I think it gets mischaracterized by a lot of people nationally. I think that it is a partnership.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I do kind of want to see what Schneider can do without Pete, because I think it would be quickly. I mean, look how quickly they got to work in 2010 when they both got to town. It could be something similar in 2024 or whenever Pete's contract runs out. Adam?
Yeah, jumping back to the media side, we've been quite disparate going from team to media, but the NFL is probably as big a bastion of American society and civilization as there is, for better or for worse. But 15 years or so ago, they thrust the league and made it international on the UK. And we now have games. You're now talking to a UK podcast. And I know for a fact there's people that listen to our pod that listen to your show on a daily basis. Is there any kind of, even acceptance isn't the right word, but do you ever guys think about how much your brand as people that talk about American football is expanding with the way in which the game is growing worldwide?
I have questions about how viable that ability to expand will be. I really do. And I mean, for you guys, I would imagine the average human being walking down the street is caring a lot more about what Manchester United or what Chelsea is doing. And my knowledge of, English football is limited, but I picked Everton back in the day and I was like, oh crap, that was a terrible choice. I liked Tim Howard and I liked Lukaku and I liked, who's the other dude that was playing for them? I forget, but whatever the case, I think Landon Donovan had played there back in the days. But, I imagine like for you guys, like that's a soccer, what we call soccer, and a sport that does not seem to have, and I could be wrong on this, but if you're not playing the actual sport growing up and haven't been playing the sport growing up, I just don't think it has the same attachment. And that's what I wonder about with this this desire to expand it to Europe. Like in basketball's everywhere. Football, non-American football is a global game too. Weirdly, our most popular sport is a sport that's played pretty much nowhere else. And I think there is interest elsewhere. And of course you have expats everywhere too. So there will be some, I think, fan support there, but I really do wonder about the viability of like a team maybe moving across the pond and you know, it seems like the Jaguars, or as y'all call them, the Jaguar, which I love the way that word is said in those commercials. I wonder how that will work. I mean, I think there would be some people as far as players who would be really interested to go play overseas. I'm not going to lie. You know, someone I grew up thinking I always wanted to live in the same country, but now there have been times where I've been like, you know, I'd be very curious to see what it's like to live in another country. And I think there might be some guys who are like, yeah, I'd love to go overseas and like expand my brand in like London and more global cities and stuff like that. But it is strange the way that the expansion is setting itself up. I would think that they would be more interested in paving a avenue to Canada or paving an avenue to Mexico. And instead, they're going across the ocean entirely. And it sort of feels like someone who studied a class in college that's about sports management, and feels almost like the owners are trying to find a way so that they can all have a little trip to London once a year or twice a year, multiple times a year. And, you know, if you take a look at the way that they determine Olympic bid cities, very often it has to do with bribery, one, but two, the family of those people in the IOC, where they want to go and like spend a vacation. It's weird how this stuff all goes down. So I wonder, it would be cool to see a team across the pond though. And if it ever gets me another chance to go to England, I haven't been there since, like 2003, 4, 5. Yeah, it's been a while. Gotta go across the pond.
The groundworks are definitely being set. They have NFL Academy over here. They have the pathway to obviously FA.
Pathway, right? Yeah.
FA Bad is now signed for the Bills. And Christian Wade is still at the Bills as well, who just give up a rugby career smartly because he played for a garbage club who play in the wrong city. But so the groundwork is being laid, but the next step is the biggest one to take, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, and travel-wise, how do you do it where these guys aren't dead every single week? Are you going to add another bye week? Is every single team that plays against a team that has to go on the road and overseas, are they going to have a bye week before every single one of those games? Like the travel side of it's, I think, logistically the most difficult part. And since Concords don't exist anymore, you know, travel is going to be a bit of a nightmare, I'd imagine, for them, at least at this point in time. Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe these Tesla things that Elon Musk is designing are about to change the world. But honestly, if I'm a football player, I don't think I want to get on one of those rockets.
I mean, as it happens, I think the horse may have bolted when it comes to a team because they put a lot of money into expanding it. There's a TV channel specifically for the NFL here. And I kind of feel like everyone's picked their team now. You know, if London gets a team, I'm a Seahawk fan and I'll go to the London team, you know, when I've got nothing else to do. But, you know, Stu and I stay up till 5:30 in the morning, 6 or 7 times every season to watch the games live, you know, and every home game starts at 9:30 p.m. And that goes for thousands of us over here in the UK. So I do wonder if the horse may have bolted when it comes to a team. But it's interesting just to see how you guys feel about the growing, the way in which the sport's growing.
You know, I think it would be really cool to see, like, this has always been my favorite league since I was a little boy. And I would love to see it in different places, but I do wonder where it would go. I do wonder what it could come at the expense of as someone who, you know, growing up in Massachusetts, I mean, that the Patriots were such a joke. They almost moved to St. Louis in 1993. Houston, where I lived, people don't like the Texans that much because they are the replacement dog for the dog that got stolen. No one in Houston likes the Tennessee Titans because that is the Houston Oilers. They won't even let the Oilers have their history back in Houston. They won't let them have their uniforms, their colors back. To me, I think that is a travesty. And I mean, we've seen teams leave, and, you know, there's a part of me where I don't joke. I want to take a basketball team away from another city, but I do wonder, all right, if you're going to move a team from a fan base that really wants it, what's going to happen? Now, Jacksonville, I really don't know. I don't know what to make of Jacksonville. I think there's interest in Jacksonville now. But as someone who's lived in Florida, Florida is generally more of a college sport fan experience. It's more about Florida State, and all those other SEC schools. The team, they're going to have to be very careful about what team they pick to make that jump. But it does feel, I think you guys are right. It does feel like they have really created a channel for a team to go over. And it feels like the most likely one is the Jaguars. I'm actually curious who overseas and who in England and in the United Kingdom, who is the most popular team? NFL
it probably
team?
is the Jaguars because they have so many home games here.
Yeah, and then you've got the grandfathered in ones from the 80s when they first tried to come over here with the Packers, the Niners, the Dolphins.
Okay.
And because it's recent success as well. So the Seahawks seem to be growing. I can see a lot more Seahawks bobble hats during the winter than I did 3-4 years ago.
Oh, nice.
But
nice.
yeah,
because the Jaguars have had, I think, maybe 10 or 11 home games here now, and they do the merchandise well. And there's a lot of people here that just adopt the Jaguars as their team.
Yeah. Finally have good uniforms again too. My God, those two-tone helmet things were disgusting. I was looking like they had puke on the back of their head.
And a good quarterback in about 3.5 weeks.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence.
So, exciting.
It's gonna happen.
So one thing you talked about, basketball being played everywhere. It's probably, of the major American sports, it's probably the one which has the smallest uptake over here, isn't it? And I mean, baseball has started playing a weekend of games over here at the Olympic Stadium. 50-odd thousand. It sold out all 2 or 3 games they played last year. I think they're coming over this summer as well. So, but the basketball kind of
just doesn't do it. Doesn't have it for some reason, and we've got such a diverse population and so many different nationalities over here that do play basketball. It just seems very strange that it hasn't taken off.
It really, that has been a surprise to me too. And 2 of my best friends in college, they actually put together this European basketball website. So they were just watching European basketball every single night. One of them has turned into like a scout, and the other one has turned into basically an assistant coach. He spent time in China. But I always ask them like random questions from time to time about it, and they never said anything about a team in England. And I was just like, man, that just seems like it would be such a common sense spot for a lot of maybe Americans who are coming overseas. They don't make it in the NBA. It feels like a place where they actually speak English would be a great place to go and to perhaps develop it. So yeah, that has been surprising to me. And again, from afar, not as informed on it as you guys are about the idea of basketball not really picking up the way that it could there. You're right. I mean, I went to London. I don't think I've ever been in a more international feeling city. I remember just walking the streets one day, and I was only 15. But I just remember thinking to myself, wow, I think I see someone from every single continent within like 100 feet of me right now. Possibly even Antarctica.
Easily. So, I mean, there's been articles where people have watched a World Cup game with every nationality in the World Cup in London. And it's neighbor to neighborhood. I mean, and let's put my flag firmly in the ground. That is a fantastic thing for this country and this city to be so diverse. Along with that, continue.
Very cool.
Anything else, Adam? We should move on to our regular thing.
Let's
which I hope Danny. I asked Danny to prep you for, so I hope he has. We do a thing every week if he hasn't, called Get in the Bin. I think Danny said after he come on the pod, he said it was the most English thing of the entire conversation he had with us.
I love that saying. Get in the bin. So it does seem like something Danny would love.
So it's basically someone or something which is just annoying. You just kind of want to get rid of for the week. It is a feature we started, and then podcasts all over the spot are doing it now as well. Not as well as the original, obviously.
I think we'd be happy to license it officially to 710 if they made us an offer we couldn't refuse. But I tell you what, Paul, what we'll do is we'll go, and then we'll give you a bit of chance to kind of get the vibe of it and go from there. So
I'll sit back.
Yeah, so my one this week, and it's been coming, but eventually it's been announced that we've got the 17th game in the NFL. And for a number of reasons, I just think it's a travesty. And the 2 main ones are records are so great in sport. And the thing, the benchmarks of 2,000 yard rushing, 5,000 yard passing or whatever, for me, when it goes to a 17 game season, the whole thing goes out the window, let alone the panic that Jeff Fisher's going to have that if he ever comes back, he can't take a team 7 or 9 or 9 or 7 or 8, 8 and 8. He hasn't got that symmetry to deal off. And the second thing is something that we're talking about why I think football is so popular over here, American football, is that it's 16 game season. A lot of people end up starting watching in the middle of a season and all of a sudden it's finished. And you've got then a 9-month frenzy to build up to the excitement for the next 16 game blast. And yeah, it's only one more game, but we know that 17 will soon become 18. And eventually that might become 19 or 20. And I just think that sometimes these sports team leagues need to realize that what they've got, one of the reasons it's so popular is the scarcity, and more games doesn't make things better. And soccer over here could certainly learn a lesson from that. But I think it's a real shame what the NFL are doing, because I think they're actually going to damage their product in the long term more than they're going to benefit it with this.
Yeah, every league in the world, every sport in the world, every league in the world should have an even number of games played, an even number of teams, and somehow an even number of games. They've got an even number of teams play an even number of games. The only exception is cricket, and 5 test match series is the best. Best of 7 in American sport playoffs is the best. But leagues should be even numbers. And for that, it's just, it's a travesty. But also, there was someone tweeted the other day about the ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal. Once it gets freed up, someone's got the perfect opportunity to do the funniest thing anyone's ever done, and that's obviously get another ship.
Do it again.
Jeff Fisher coming back, and I think our pal Jackson Bevins tweeted earlier that Jeff Fisher will come back, get to 8 and 8, and then retire would be just the funniest thing anyone's ever done.
That would be very funny. Very true. Paul, any thoughts on the 17 game season? It stinks to me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's annoying, but it was going to happen. I've accepted it. I accepted it probably a couple of years ago. I knew it was going to come at some point. I'm glad that we got to wait as long as we did. I will say, I think I was more worked up about the 7 teams making it into the playoffs than I was actually about the 17 game schedule when I first figured it was going to be on the docket. I think that the way that they're setting it up, where one conference has all of the home games and the other conference has all the road games, is the only way that you can try to establish some sort of balance. But yeah, this is just so that they can add the 18th game. And look, the players don't like it. I feel for them. They don't really have any bargaining power here. Like, the owners are always going to have multiple fists over them, because there's so many players and there's so many guys who aren't physically able to sit out and waste a year potentially of their career to make a point. And until we get to a point where there's going to be guys willing to sit out a year for the greater good, or for the league's greater good, or for the players' greater good, at least as it's portrayed to them. Yeah. So I could definitely see 20 games at some point. I will say the one good thing that the NFL has going for it, and most American football has going for it, 1 game a week, I think, is perfect.
Yes.
And I feel like even if there are more games for the Premier League, what is it about 1 to 2 games a week or so?
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect amount. I think soccer actually, in even with Major League Soccer here, I think they do a very good job of it. I like 1 to 2 games a week. It's more of an event. Baseball's hard, 162 games. Basketball too.
I was just about to ask, I don't know much about baseball at all. So you two, I'll have to defer to your 2 knowledge on that. But you have 5 or 6 different pitchers in your roster. Wouldn't it be better just to have the best pitcher against the best pitcher every week, and 1 game every Saturday, Sunday with 40,000 people in the stands? Like, what are we getting from 162 games? Who cares?
I'd love it, but then it minimizes the importance of pitching if it's just one guy, like, it's, hey, do you have the best one? It would almost turn it into the NFL where, hey, do you have a great quarterback? And if you have a great quarterback, you're set. It would be in baseball, hey, do you have one of the best pitchers? Oh, you're set. So interesting idea. Definitely. I would love less games. Seriously. I don't like baseball that much. I don't. It's my by far 3rd favorite sport. And honestly, if the Major League Soccer League was not kind of a joke, I think I would probably like soccer a little bit more than baseball. But
Yes, on MLS, I went to the Sounders Dallas playoff game 18 months ago, and it was the worst 3-3 draw I've ever watched. And also, one of the guys I went with, shout out Andy Robinson, said it was like being at something which everything was familiar, but everything else was different. It's perfect. It was weird. Yeah, mine is. I feel a bit bad because I know he's had his health issues. It's Chris Mortensen, who seems to be leading a one-man band charge to get Mac Jones drafted by either the Jets or the 49ers. Everything he has tweeted this week has been banging the drum for Mac Jones, which if the Niners do all that to get Mac Jones is potentially hilarious because Justin Fields, Trey Lance would be terrifying. But it's just like it's so clear. It might be Mortensen's opinion, but it just seems like it's the clearest way of Mac Jones is leaning on Mac Jones's agent, whoever that may be, is leaning on someone so established in sports media to get the drum banging. And as someone tweeted with Justin Fields earlier, everyone is just overthinking everything with those 2, 3, 4 picks in this draft, and it's going to get excruciating for the next 3.5 weeks.
Yeah. Ugh.
Or do you ever get little nuggets that are fed to you because people would really like something being discussed on air?
I have not, but I think it's because I think people know that I would be like, yeah, I know you're trying to get me to do something for you. But I hope that's the case. It also might be because like people are like, oh, who's this jackass?
I don't think so.
No, it might be, honestly. I haven't had anything like that here. In Houston, I had a couple of people that like reached out and was like, hey, like, can you have me on for this? And I'm like, nah, but I don't know. I probably should have in some of those situations. I'll scratch your back, they scratch mine. But I guess I just never want to do the first scratching to get the eventual back scratch back.
Anyone for your bin?
Yes. Put them in the bin. All right.
Let's do it.
Pro days are so stupid. NFL pro days.
That's a great one.
The amount of stock that we put into these stupid guys running around in their shorts. Wow, Zach Wilson just threw a pass 64 yards while running in the other direction. Now he's the number 2 overall pick. Today we have Mac Jones. Oh, Mac Jones, we saw a little bit of his belly. He looks kind of fat. Does he work out? And then he misses 2 throws, and you see both Bill Belichick and Kyle Shanahan look at him like they're 2 dads that just saw their son let them down in the middle of a Little League game, and now they're not going to get fed dinner or something like that after the fact. It's one of those things where we put so much stock into it, but everyone should just go back in time to that moment in time where Johnny Manziel was having a pro day, and there's a dude chasing him with a broom. And we acted like him running away from a broom meant he was going to be a great quarterback. And yet we do this every single year. Wow, Kyle Bowler threw a pass from one knee 60 yards, which is really cool. Guess what? Doesn't mean a darn thing. And that Zach Wilson throw, it was really cool. But the people that were getting all excited about Zach Wilson, and now he's supposedly the number 2 overall pick, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with his most recent pro day experience as opposed to any actual evaluation of the guy. That's been driving me a little bit crazy of late. So there you go.
That's great.
Pro days, throw him in the bin.
There you go. Also, that Bill Belichick clip is the funniest thing that's happened.
Yeah, it's so great.
It's perfect. The timing of it. It's like a Larry David joke, like in Curb. It's perfect. Also, last week Adam put 4-figured heights in the bin, so it's kind of along.
Yeah, 6051. No one knows what that means, and it needs to be banished immediately. But it's interesting that you say that about the Zach or the Mac Jones, tummy thing or whatever, because the scouts get older every year, but it's the same people and the same talking heads in general that talk about guys but unfortunately the guys that they're talking about are the same age. And that gap is growing and growing and growing. And in all society, 60-year-old men are going to find it more difficult to speak about and to the mindset of 22-year-old men. And I wonder if, like, when you talk about someone like Mina Kimes as revolutionary figure, in my opinion, when it comes to talking about the NFL, it feels a bit harsh, but a lot of these people that are just too old to talk about the mindset of young people, you hate to say it, they might need to get in the bin as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen it from guys like Bill Polian, who I'm not a fan of. I think he ruined the NFL with the 5-yard contact rule because his receivers couldn't get off a jam. oh, we can't beat the Patriots, and they score 3 points the next year. Good job, Bill. Because the league has just gone crazy with passing numbers since then. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that, and I think that I think some people are good at it. I try to stay good at it. Honestly, who knows? I mean, I'm going to be 32 in like a couple of weeks, and I hope that I am still being able to reach these kids, but I at times do feel like I'm, that meme of Steve Buscemi with the skateboard over his shoulder. Oh, how you doing, you fellow kids?
Who is the guy at the combine that does his own 40-yard dash? Is it Charlie? Not Charlie.
Yeah,
Rich Eisen.
No, Charlie Cassidy. It was
Charlie Cassidy, who does his own timing in the stands.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like come on,
down,
what are we doing here?
Yeah. There is an element of, oh, I did this back in the day, and this is how I used to do it. And I think that I think a lot of guys struggle accepting the way that things are done now. And I mean, I think that's natural for all humans. I mean, right?
Sure.
I mean, music, it's almost always what you grew up listening to. And yeah, you might be able to bring in some other different genres of music along the way, but you're not going to be as into it as the people that are growing up around that music. And it just continues and it continues and it continues. And I think it also comes to the way that you look at this time of year. I will say this is probably my least favorite time of the year for the NFL, even though there's a lot of action, because I find the way that the draft is covered, I think it's done in a way to grab attention as opposed to honest evaluation. And I will say there are certain places, I think that the Ringer and specifically what Danny Kelly's been doing with the draft rankings, my God, that is just a beautifully created website and template that you can look like in great detail at prospects or glance over them if you so choose. But this time of year, you'll see all these mock drafts out there. Some people just trying to fit, players that they would like to see on a team to those teams as the draft goes further and further along. But there's also just mock drafts that are clearly trying to get attention by changing who's number one at the top. And I almost entirely dislike draft coverage, even though I know there are some really great people that cover the draft, whether it's, two of my old friends back in Houston, John Harris, who is the Texan sideline reporter, and Lance Zerline, who, worked at the competing station with me. We did one show together before I was told that I had to stop doing shows with that one station. Long story. He worked at the NFL Network, and I think he does a fantastic job of breaking it down. But the way that there's just so much stuff that's thrown out there over these next couple of weeks, and I'm sort of like, you know what? I just want to see the draft play out. And I don't want to get too many opinions about prospects that I know that I haven't watched that much of based off of the eyes of other guys. I kind of would rather just see what happens and evaluate it from there. Because you run the risk of, falling in love with a guy that you've watched a couple of times and be like, oh, yeah, that guy's good. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, wait, all my evaluations of college players are wrong. So this time of year is interesting. That's for sure. I can't wait for the draft, though, even though the Seahawks have like 3 picks.
It's doing mock drafts on all the different websites you can do as a Seahawk fan this year is boring. You're just watching the go from 1 to 270 really quickly.
And watch him trade back out of that pick too.
Yeah. Before we start recording, you described yourself as a home food cooking. Obviously, Adam is a caterer by trade. We've asked a few people. We had Adam Amin on last year who gave a food take of a food I've still never heard of. Was it strawberry vanilla?
It was like a pretzel cake
strawberry
thing.
Cake pretzel.
I think it was a Thanksgiving thing.
Yeah.
That was the same reaction that we had, Paul, I think.
Madre Harper, who was on the Giants, said he didn't like coconuts. Jessamine, or coconut. Jessamine said that she hated mortadella ham.
Yeah, mortadella sausage.
Which is something I come across in my day job every day, and it makes me laugh every day when I see it on the shelf. What's your go-to thing to cook, and what's a controversial or food take thing you have?
I have so many controversial ones. So let's start off with those. I don't like cheese.
At all.
I'll tolerate it on pizza, but I will pick some of it off. I like the tomato sauce on pizza much more than I like the cheese on pizza. I can't explain this one other than that I used to eat bags of mozzarella cheese as a little kid, and one time it was moldy and I got sick. And then I had pizza again, and the pizza had basil on it, and I saw the green, and I just was kind of grossed out by it forever. Then someone told me that cheese is actual mold, and I was like, ugh. It also doesn't help me now that I'm a little bit lactose intolerant, which is something I've developed later in life. So that's always a bit of a factor too. But it's really like just a psychological thing. Chocolate, I also don't like. Why? I don't know, because I love Guinness and I love coffee and pretty much anything that tastes similar, I do like. Heck, there's even this chocolate protein powder that doesn't actually taste like chocolate that I like. But this also stems back from a psychological childhood incident where I loved cinnamon raisin cookies as a kid. My mom bought home Shaw's brand. It's a grocery store in southern Massachusetts. Bag of oatmeal raisin cookies. I thought they were oatmeal raisin cookies. Bit into it. It was an oatmeal chocolate chip cookie. I cried the rest of the day.
If it was Hershey's chocolate, then that's totally acceptable, because Hershey's is the worst tasting thing on the planet. So we'll allow that one.
I don't know if it was Hershey's chocolate, whatever the case it was. Yeah, it's cheese and chocolate. Not the biggest fan of. Actually, no, I don't like chocolate and cheese. Yeah, it's weird. I don't like to have cheese on anything. Other than that,
without straying too far away from the focal point of this pod, I've heard that the food scene in Houston is terrific.
It's the best. It is the best. It's the best. It's the best. It's the best.
Because there's a real mix of cultures there, isn't there?
Everything. It is. There is. Anthony Bourdain did an episode there, and I think he did a really good job of getting the full vibes there. There's barbecue. There's Tex-Mex. There's an unbelievable Chinatown and Asian cuisine, whether it's Vietnamese or anything. And then, I mean, you just got your old fashioned, brisket, barbecue. And of course you got Italian food everywhere. It's, I think Houston is a melting pot that you wouldn't think of, but I love that city with a passion. It's not a place I would recommend visiting. Weirdly, you kind of have to know people, but I love that place so much. And yeah, the food is out of this world. It is so good.
I think David Chang did an episode on Ugly Delicious there. And again, Houston, for me, if someone says Houston, I just think quintessential American big road city with high-rise buildings. But it really opened my eyes to what an amazing place it looks like it could be.
So many fast food options too. I lived within a mile of 2 Chick-fil-A's and 2 Whataburgers. And Whataburger in Texas is like what In-N-Out is to Californians. It's the localized fast food place. They have these very unique looking buildings that are like checkered orange and white. It's okay, but they swear by it down there. And yeah, it's one of many different options that you have. I can see why so many people pack on some pounds when they move to Texas. It is a tasty place.
Yeah. Also in Seattle, they've got their own Dick's, which is something I've never actually had over my 5 or 6.
Yeah.
My 5 or 6 trips out there, I've never been to.
Never been either. Don't know why.
It's okay. I mean, it's pretty much like your local fast food chain. And I just get a kick out of people. When I first moved here and I said, I'm going to go get some fast food at Dick's. And they're like, oh, you're going to get a bag of Dick's, eh? And I was like, that's
classic.
Funny. Classic humor.
So yeah, massively appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Obviously, you spent like 4 hours on the radio earlier, then you spent over an hour with us to.
As you can tell, I don't shut up and I have no friends. So.
I presume Laura told you about the home and home, so we're on your show for 4 hours tomorrow morning. I think that was the deal there.
Sure. I'm not even going to do anything. You guys can do the whole thing for me. How about
that?
So where can people watch your conversation with Seahawks Twitter, and then obviously catch you on socials and maybe tune in of an afternoon over here to yours and Danny's show?
So I have a YouTube channel. I'm trying to put up as many clips from the shows on 710 in addition to the Getting to Know Seahawks Twitter. It's up on youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Also on Twitter, at Gallant says, I have a crappy Instagram account that is essentially the same thing. It's just me posting like clips of myself, but occasionally I post fun things. It's like at Seattle Sports Paul, PAWL. If you like Facebook, facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. Basically, I just post all the same stuff to every single one of these avenues. And occasionally I ramble and have some thoughts. Less thoughts these days, seeing as Twitter's a hellscape, but luckily there's less politics on it, at least compared to where that was the last like 4 years before that. But yeah. And guys, thank you so much, Stu and Adam. This was a lot of fun. Anytime you guys want to have me on, seriously, don't be a stranger. I would love to do this again. This was an absolute blast.
No worries. As I say, appreciate and enjoy going to a sporting event over the weekend.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, very jealous.
Yeah! Although it's baseball, so. But it's sports. It's live sports. I
mean, Safeco Field is one of the most unbelievable stadiums I've been in. I haven't been for Mariners game. Me and Adam did a tour. I think when we first met Adam over
it was 2 days
7 years ago.
It was 2 days before that Raiders game that we did a tour of Safeco Field.
I went 18 months ago. I saw the Who and Liam Gallagher there the night before the Ravens game at Central Field. Yeah. 50.
Wow.
What worked out at £45 for tickets to see the Who over here is 140 quid for like row ZZ. But anyway, if people want to get in touch with podcasts, they can. All the usual means and methods. Patreon.com/The Pedestrian Podcast. A massive thanks to the few new people we have on there. Max Lang, Maura Dooley signed up after the Doug Baldwin pod, which was very much appreciated. And Mark Christensen over the weekend joined up. They joined Brogan Clasper, Dan Cohen, Nick Wright, Gerard Sherry, Harry Craig, Will Travers, and Dave Sayers. Massive thanks, Paul. This has been the Pedestrian Podcast.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Perfect.
All right, guys. This is a blast. Thank you.
Pleasure. Well, we
time flew by.
I know. I just can't. I've done my clock for the first time. I can't believe it was nearly an hour and a half. It was great fun.
I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're